Hi everyone. In this last lecture, I wanted to cover a bit about debugging and the basics and kind of show off a cool debugger view that you can see in Eclipse. Again, it's kind of hard to focus on all the aspects that go into debugging, but I just want to cover the few compilation or runtime errors that you might encounter during your career so far and at later classes at DePaul. Now, you are going to be expected there's not really a course on how to debug. When you're learning how to program and coding, it will just be something you get used to while you're working. But I want to show off kind of general things you might run into using these two Java files called compile errors and runtime errors. And of course, I want to show off some cool tricks inside of the debugger that you can use to help when you're building up your code. So to go ahead and get started, the compile errors or compilation errors, they're going to be pretty straightforward and everyone makes them all the time. They're syntax errors. The more you code in a certain language, the less you'll make these. But Java is really neat in comparison to, say, idle with Python, because this is a very powerful tool that allows you to actually have pre-made error fixes. So if you could see here, if I hover over in compile errors line 7, I have this issue that says the scan cannot be resolved to a variable. And you actually have a bunch of options here. You can create a parameter, you can create a field, or you can create a local variable, and that really depends on what you want to do here. If you hover over the scan, you can go ahead and hit create local variable, and it'll actually go ahead and say, okay, this needs to be a scanner, because I know that you're trying to make a scanner here. Now we get this other error that says scanner cannot be resolved to a type, and Java is smart enough to say, hey, you forgot to do an import, so you could just hit an import there, and it'll bring it up for you. So some of these errors you could see down here. Another one is the method print array double array in the type compile errors is not applicable for the arguments of int array. So what's happening is that we're passing over an array of integers in to this print array option. So if we hover over it, there's two options. You can either change the method print array of double to print array of int, and you'll see down here this will shift it over to an integer, or what you could do is go ahead and change types of nums to be a double. So either one of those works. And then if you could see here, cannot make a static reference to the non-static method print array. And essentially right there, that is just something that we're working with in this. You'll learn about private, static and non-static later. But for our purposes here, public static is what we're using, and it will go ahead and make that run. Now we get one more error right here. This one is probably a given that most of folks know. Syntax error, insert the semicolon to complete it. Great, and again, I'll just kind of fly through a few more of these. You can see down here, this one was missing the int, and what's happening here, let me try to hover over it. I cannot be resolved to a variable. What is this supposed to be? Oh, I need to create a local variable. Okay, I did that. That solved it up there. What's happening here? I forgot my semicolon. So now you'll see here that we're also missing a return statement, because what is the return statement supposed to be of this one? It's supposed to be a Boolean, but this method is only printing out an array, and it doesn't really make sense for us to make it return true or false. So that we can either change this to a void automatically like so, and it should run, or if you want to return something, you can just say return true, something like that as well, and that will solve it. Just to be like good programmers, I'll make this a void, and if I go ahead and run this code now, great. Now we can see that I have all the values printed out. And now you can see here, I like the value 14.2 after I put it in. Thanks for using the program. So again, these are very straightforward ways of just looking at compile errors and what's going on and how they work. And one more thing that you might notice, though, is that sometimes you might run into runtime errors. So again, Java is a static language that's very nice because it looks at everything before it tries to run. But even then, it's not omnipotent, and it won't be able to determine every single error that you have. And these are ones that you're going to most likely solve or run into. And these are called runtime errors. And runtime errors are essentially things that happen when you're running your program that Java can't solve. So these break your program essentially. The other ones won't even let your program run. They're a compilation and won't compile. These ones are runtime ones. And you'll see here, you might have like horrors of this by this point. I know I used to. Index -1 out of bounds for length 5. So a very straightforward error that you're going to get a lot is the index out of bounds. And for here, I just want to show off a way of how you can actually say, okay, well, how do I solve this? Well, take a look at what's happening inside of your trace or stack trace. At we_tree.runtime errors.main, I can hit 9. Okay, I jump up to my method up here, so that's where I went. Okay, so now I think There's another thing above it though. It says Weetree runtime errors print S array runtime errors at 19. Oh, okay. I'm hitting an error at system.out.print, and what is this error? There's an exception in the thread main, index -1 out of bounds for length 5. And essentially you can read this bottom up. So this is kind of like going from the bottom and trying to trace it back upwards. And you can see here that when you click on these blue things, I will tell you what the errors are, and what you need to do is try to look at the for loop, because again, this isn't the issue. Isn't this print line? What is the issue? Well, I is the issue, because I have an index that's -1 that's supposed to be from 0 to 5. And if we take a look at my for loop, what's happening? Okay, so for int of I is equal to 0, I is less than the strings dot length. Oh, I'm decrementing my I, so I'm going from 0 to -1, and -1 isn't in my index values at all. It's going from 0 up to 5, so what I need to do is increment this instead of decrement it. And if I run this guy, great, now I can see I have a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Let me enter in my favorite whole number again, and we'll see here. Okay, I think something's happening, right? Or what's happening here? So if I go ahead and try to do the fill array of my nums now, this method, I get a new scanner. I go ahead and I make it less than the less than the overall length of the numbers. Let me put in one more. And we'll see here, uh-oh, I'm getting another issue. I put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it looks like I'm going 1 over, and what is the length, or what is the size of my array here? It's 5. So let me see here. Exception in thread main, Java lane out of bounds, index 5 out of bounds for length 5. Let me jump to here. Okay, it's in my fill array methods, maybe. Okay, I jump into here. Nums of I is equal to nscan.nextInt. And why is this happening? Well, let's take a look at the for loop again. Okay, for int of I is equal to 0, I is less than or equal to nums.length. And this is a point that I kind of want to show off a little bit more here in my MS Paint here. So excuse me for my drawing style. But if you go ahead and you have an array of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, as a general reminder, the length of this is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 5-element array, but we start counting at 0. So this means our index values are from 0 to 4. And this creates an equation that we can always use in any language that essentially says if you want to index through an array, you go from 0 to the length of your array A minus 1. Because again, we start at 0, so we're always 1 behind the value of the array. And what happens here, if we go ahead and we have an equality sign, that means that instead of going from 0 to 4, we're going from 0 to 5. So if we actually go ahead and delete this equality sign inside of our for loop here, and I'm going to type in just 15 a few times, now our program is running fine and we're not getting any more runtime errors. So that is just some ways that you can look at an array, really program out how it's working. And to really show off what's going on here, I want to go back to the compile errors method, and I want to show off this little ant that's over here. It's very neat to get used to now, is the Eclipse debuggers. So first of all, you want to go to Window and then Preferences. And underneath Preferences, you're going to want to go to Java. And then in Java, you're going to see this file called debug. So click on debug and then click the arrow and then go to step filtering. And if you could just click the use step filters and check mark all of these, what this will do is make sure that your debugger doesn't randomly go to like built-in Java method or some crazy different methods there as well. And now you'll notice here to actually run this debugger, we have a little bug at the left of our play sign right here, debug test. And what you would like to do first is go ahead and put a stop point in your code. So you might have seen this before on the left side, this blue pieces of on the left. What you could do is double click or right click on that and hit toggle breakpoint. Now after you hit toggle breakpoint and you hit the debugger guy, you can always, it's going to ask you to confirm perspective switch. Say, remember my decision, hit switch, and I'll show you how you can go back between them. So at the top right up here, this is the debugger view. If you click on Java again, it will take you back to the view you're used to, but we want to stay in the debugger view, and this debugger is a really neat way to look through your code. So to actually go ahead and step through this breakpoint that we just made, if you hit F5, what will happen, oops, let me go ahead and run it again, is you will see that if I right click on it, we can go to, let's try to hit F5 one more time. And you'll notice that when you hit F5 on your code here, it's going to move you through your code, and take a look at this index value. When I hit my line 15, it actually increases on the right side. So if you're ever experiencing your code and you're wondering, okay, well, why isn't this running this way? Try to set a breakpoint, hit the debugger view in the bug up there, and then start pressing F5 to go through it. And you'll notice that it goes through my entire piece of code. And this is very useful because it tracks the values and everything as well. And if we go to runtime errors, let's try to put a breakpoint down here at line 37. I'm going to hit debugger view. Let's go ahead and give it a little bit. I think it requires me to type in something few times. See it? Now, if we see here, my end scan is closed, and when I go to print array, we can see the nums is equal to ID of 20, and it actually gives me each value of this number. And if I press F5, we'll see that I is added because we're in an incrementer right now in a for loop. And this, if I keep pressing F5, you can see it keeps going, and I'm constantly printing out stuff to the console. So that's just a very brief introduction to the debugger. Please go ahead and use this to try to increase your ability to debug. It's very useful, and I will say it's probably going to be required for you to be able to know how to use this for 300 and later. The thing is you might not get tested on it, but you should know how to debug your code by that point, and this is a great tool for doing that as well. Awesome, everyone.